Okay, so I thought I'd try something different today and show a little bit of a tutorial on how making Habs in the Starfield creation kit works. It's not terribly easy and it can get a little complicated depending on what you want to do. So, this tutorial video is going to assume that you already have the creation kit, that you already know some basics of how to save plugins and how to interact with ESM and .esp files, and it will not touch on some of the deeper things like lighting or cluttering or design. This is strictly going to look at how you create a hab and how you make it work in the game so that it works like the in-game habs. So first of all, I've already loaded in the list of habs that Bethesda has made. We're on a brand new plugin here. And you'll note that habs are all pack-ins, which is a collection of objects that have been sort of tied together and will maintain their relative locations. This is really useful for hab making. You can find habs under World Objects. Oh god, why did I click that? World Objects, Pack-In, and then Hab. And my usual recommendation here would be that you find a hab that is already the size that you want, or uses the pieces that you want, and you make a copy of that hab. So, for instance, I would like to make a new Deimos hab, and I know that I want it to be a 2x1 from inside the game. So if we look at an existing 2x1, let me turn the markers off. We can see, okay, so this is what it looks like. And, you know, I want to change this. I want a hab with more weapons racks and maybe the weapons workbench included. Right. So, my first thing is that I'm going to duplicate it. And I'll rename it. Let's do Hab Fen Armory 2x1. I usually try to maintain the structure, the naming structure that Bethesda goes with. It keeps things a bit more organized. If you want to find your stuff later and make it very distinct, you can add tags to it. So I could call this, you know, Fen underscore ship packin and so on. And then this way I can search for it more easily later by having called it this. I've decided, for instance, that my shipyard from which newer and interesting designs come from is called Fendragon Shipyards, which I abbreviate to FDS. And from there, now I have my tag. I make my object. I do want to rename it. And it appears at the top of the list. And now, if I was really like making a lot of stuff, I could use the text filter to make sure that I only show the stuff that I've made. So, now we load my copy into the render window. And this is to make sure that, you know, you're not editing the game hab instead of your hab. And so, you know, from here I can edit the insides, I can delete things. So, a thing to note, if you want to create habs from scratch, you know, so I'm going to make a note here. The pieces that I want are SHP gen int per SM floor and associated things. So I can hit everything in here, and I want all of it gone. nothing, I want to keep nothing about this hab. Great. So, we know that my stuff was called shipgen int, and we can find it all per small wall, ceiling, floor. Floors. There we go. Oh, that's a neat looking floor, right? Now, Habs are picky. This may turn out to be incorrect. I don't know how other Hab makers do it, but I have found it is easiest if you stick to the coordinate system that Bethesda used. It means you don't have to worry about lining up markers and things like volumes so that your Hab lines up correctly with other ships' Habs, with the game Habs. So your center floor should be aligned to 0, 0, and minus 1.25. This is the center point of any Hab. The minus 1.25 is the floor level, and this should line it up correctly with other Habs when it's in-game. We'll make it a 2x1. So I now need the ones that have the doors in them, which is which one? Right. Doors are usually labeled EX, SM, whatever. Now, you could spend forever and a day working out how to move this, which I did here by pressing the E key, and doing your best to like zoom in, really try to get it lined up. Or you can remember that these are all on a coordinate system, which is what I've noticed from looking at Habs at a pretty deep level at this point. So when I go north on the y-axis, I need this to line up at 0, and the next center point of a floor piece is going to be on the 4s, always on the 4s. And if I now line this up to the minus 1.25 and I hit enter to save that positioning, you can see that I have a perfectly aligned ship floor piece with no gaps. So we will duplicate this and set the next one at the -4, closer to my viewpoint in the render window. And now we have the floor of a standard 2x1 Hab once again. Great, we have a floor. Now we need to add some walls. So, walls, walls, walls. Walls are where things get interesting, because walls are labeled based on what direction they belong in. Now, you can rotate these walls around, but they are named for a reason, and that reason is how the game decides to transform these walls into doors when they are connected to the next Hab in line. So, to go positive Y, we go in the 4 direction, and we grab a 4 wall. Great. And we stick it in the same position as the floor piece. And what this does is it will center, you can see from the yellow axes here, that this marks the rotation point of these pieces. And so if you line them up specifically to the center point of the floor piece that you want it to coincide with, you will have, again, seamless lined up pieces. We've got a 4 piece, let's get an aft piece. Which here needs to be lined at the -4. And there we go. fore and aft are now in, and now we get to put in walls for the port and the starboard. So port walls, port walls, port walls. Port walls here, we're going to use ones that are labeled. Let's double check these. Yeah, mid. We'll just do one of each. 1, 2, and 3. And it's the same deal. They line up with the center point of the floor piece that you want them to merge into. And the starboard pieces. Okay, so those are our primary walls in, but we're missing the corners. So, these are usually labeled with the fore and aft versions, and they are also directional. So, you will have aft, where is it? It should be. Yes, aft corner in left and aft corner in right. And these, of course, need to line up with the aft wall. So left looks like it goes on the starboard side. And fore, corner. Okay, we have all of our walls in place. Last, we need to put ceilings in. Ceilings, there you are. These follow exactly the same coordinates as the floor, because they are already rotated into the correct place. So we'll take this ceiling and stick it in the middle, because we're going to want ceilings with the holes in them for the hatches for the top and bottom. Okay, let's see how we did. Well, that is a very nice looking ship hab. Nice and empty, nothing in it, ready for us to decorate or leave empty, whatever we decide to do with it. All of the floor edges are perfectly aligned, with no gaps, no Z-fighting, nothing that would look weird or out of place to a user. We just have to get the hatch plug ceiling and hatch plug floors done in. Where is that ceiling plug? So, these will of course use the exact same coordinate system as the rest. Now we have lined up plugs. We have a complete hab. So, to get this to show in the game, you now have to make a SMS form and a CO form. I'll show you what I mean. So if we go look at the Deimos Habs, we will find a set of CO, SMS Hab, default 2 long, 1 wide, 1 high, A set. This is the form that tells the game that your Hab is a constructible object. In other words, something that the player can choose to build. These point towards, the created object will point towards a list. And so we need to make a list that contains our Hab. Well, we were using an armory, and it's just the one. So we could say duplicate this, because we want to use the same stats. And we can rename it so that it matches our other Hab, our brand new Hab. And here is how we tell the game which outsides go to which insides. We don't have an outside for this Hab yet, so we'll need to come back to that. But our inside, we can at least do. And then we can go and we can take the Deimos Armory outside. So the inside is labeled _INT for interior. The outside is the same name, just without that. So we'll duplicate this, because it's the same size as our Hab. Rename it so that it matches the rest of our stuff, and say go. Now, if I search for my keyword, and I get just the things I've made. And if we go and we look at our outside, we see that it is just, it's the Deimos outside. Excellent. That's what I wanted. And now, if I wanted to, all I have to do is create the forms. This is Hab making at its most basic. We have an inside, we have an outside, we use forms. And there is one more step after we make the forms. The order in which you do this doesn't really matter. It just needs to be done. So we'll finish the form by finding my outside. And so now keyword linked exterior points to my outside piece, and spaceship linked interior points to the same thing but my inside piece. If you wanted to, you could name your own manufacturer and create your own keyword here. The downside is that no logo will appear with your Hab if you do that, because the game logos are set and not editable at this time. That said, here we can also change the values for the ship Hab. Variant is for when it's a member of a list, and so it's very important that this be in some semblance of order. No two Habs should share a variant value, or else this could cause them to not show up in the list of Habs that are buildable. Spaceship crew tells the game how many crew members can be in the Hab at once. Spaceship crew slots tells the game how many crew slots this adds to your ship's total crew count. Spaceship part mass tells the game how heavy your Hab is, and if you want to find other things to add, you can look through the spaceship-related keywords to add or change things about the Hab. You could have it add engines, you could have it add grav jump, you can add passenger slots. This tells it how many passengers you add to your passenger holding count. And so on. Many of these are linked to structural or non-Hab related ship objects, but you're welcome to play with these as you wish. Just be ready to acknowledge that you might break something. So, we're not going to change this kind of stuff. We don't care. We'll hold on, we'll take that. Look at that. We have now our form that tells the game which exterior goes to which interior. We also need, as you saw before, a CO SMS Hab that tells it, this is what I want to make buildable. So we will duplicate one of these. We give it a tag. It's not a set, we're just building one. And we'll point it to, we'll point our created object to the form that we just finished making, which is going to be this FDS SMS Hab Fen Armory. Excellent. We'll say that this is priority 1. This priority number tells the game where in the list of Habs this should be appearing. If this priority number conflicts with an already existing Hab, it may cause issues where your Habs or the Game Hab that is supposed to be in that slot do not show up correctly in-game. Here you can also set how much your Hab costs, what description shows up when a player is in the shipbuilder interface, and whether or not you want it to have match conditions. In this case, for instance, the Deimos structure that we copied has a keyword of vendor, Deimos, habitat, struct, common. So it's rated as a common Hab, and it shows up wherever common Habs show up. You also have keywords like exclusive, where this will only show up at the Deimos star yard. You can say it only shows up at star stations. You can say it only shows up at Tayo places. You could make your own keyword here and determine from there where it shows up if you wanted to. But we're going to just remove this. And that means that it will show up at every vendor. It will not come and go like some of the Habs seem to, where some vendors sometimes have and sometimes they don't. This will show up everywhere. We can give it a new description. And you want to make sure that your recipe filter here is category ship mod Hab. If you copy an existing CO form, this should already be there. You shouldn't have to worry about it. So we've got the back end ready to go. And now we need to link the inside with the outside. The way I like to do this is I zoom out so that I can see the entire Hab at once. This makes it easier to, see all of the pieces that I'm going to need to interact with. Then what I do is I load the outside piece by hitting Edit. So then I load the outside piece by hitting Edit. And here you can select Open in New Render Window. If your computer struggles with the creation kit, this may be difficult for you. You may want to close other apps, other tabs, other things you have open. You'll know it when it happens. And this is also why we save frequently when we're working in the creation kit, because you never know when it's going to crash. Regardless, here, my computer can handle it. I will hit Open in New Render Window and then Edit in Render Window. And this gives me a little pop-up, and I can close the form. And I can now move my secondary render window off to the side so that I can zoom out in the same way. And so now these two Habs are perfectly lined up. In the main render area, here in the cell filter and the space where it lists what is inside my Hab, I will search for one of the pieces that I need to link. My system for this is that I go from the ceiling to the fore, to the port, to the aft, to the starboard, to the floor. You'll see what I mean shortly. You can obviously come up with your own system for making sure that you don't miss doorways, but on the larger Habs, it's very important that you be methodical about this, because if you miss a hatch or you miss a wall that turns into a doorway, the Hab will not connect correctly from the inside to the other Habs, and this will lead to bugs, visual bugs especially, and players who are unhappy with you for making a Hab that doesn't work. So here we'll start with the ceiling, which I search for by typing in plug C. This means that I only get the 2 ceiling plugs. Now, when I click on one, it highlights the object. And so we know that this is the bottom ceiling plug. And what we'll do is we'll hit Edit. And we'll go to LinkRef. Now, these connections must be force persist, or else the game will not correctly transfer them into the doorways, or the ladders in this case. From here, I can right-click and hit New, and it brings this up. If you just from here hit Select Reference and Render Window, this will not let you select in the outside, which is where we need to be selecting. So I will click on my render window with the outside Hab, and then I will hit Select Reference, and it gives me this lovely little targeting mouse, and I will bring it over to the matching plug on the exterior, which we know was the bottom one. I will double click, and this fills in a cell and a reference. Let the creation kit decide these. Don't worry about it too much. The only thing you need to select here, as long as you've correctly selected your plugs, is to set the keyword. You can type directly from this drop-down, and the keyword we need is a snap keyword. So we type in SN for snap. And what that takes us to is these snap behavior keywords. You can see we have a number of them. We have fore, port, starboard, aft, floor, ceiling, foundation, and linked ref keyword. The disable linked ref ones that are directionally labeled are for making objects disappear when you have a doorway form or a ladder come down from that location. This is how the game makes things disappear when they might otherwise be there. Snap Behavior Foundation is for outposts. The one we need for doors, the only one we use when we're linking inside doors to outside doors, is Snap Behavior Linked Ref keyword. So we select it, we hit OK, and now we have our reference. And then we can hit Enter or OK to save that change. And we do the same for each of the doors, making sure to match them exactly one for one. So this top plug will get matched to the other top plug, and then we'll do the doorways and the bottom plugs. Part of what I like to do here and why I have it open like this is so that I can rotate the Hab so that I can see things without losing where I'm looking, so to speak. So for 4, I type in 4. We've got the 2 corners and the wall. The wall is the one we need. Same as for the ceiling pieces. And then I move to the port side. Paying attention to which wall is highlighted before I make any connections. as usual, your workflow may differ from mine. There isn't really a right or wrong way to order these things, like I said earlier, as the point is that they are correctly connected. I have my own system. It makes sure that I don't miss any of the doorways and that this all works when I load into the game. Now, for the floor, I return my view to the top-down view that I was on before, and then I carefully flip it so that the bottom is showing in the same kind of configuration that the top was. I then flip the inside exactly the same way. This way I know that the plugs are lined up with each other and I'm not going to cross them in a way that would make the Hab not work. And that is all of the hatches done, which means that I can now close my secondary render window. You can do this before or after. You add objects to the inside, but the end point is that your inside now knows how to make the outside go. So, if we had stuff in here, and for this we'll go back to the Demos Hab that we were looking at before. And I'll show you what I mean with the other snap keywords that are available. We have a bunch of stuff on the wall, and if a door were placed here, this all would be in the way of the player walking through the door, and so it must go away when the door is there, otherwise you're blocked still. And the way the game does this is with a LinkRef keyword. And in this case, it's the one for the port because that's the wall that it is associated with. And the way these work is instead of needing a second reference window, you select your object, you right-click in here to make a new reference, you select your reference in the render window by double-clicking, and then you select the keyword that matches it. If this keyword is wrong, if it is tied to the floor or the ceiling or the port or the other doors, instead what will happen, instead of disappearing when the doorway is in the way of these objects will instead disappear for one of those other doors. Again, leading to buggy and interesting behavior. It may take some trial and error with disabling objects on doorways for you to understand how they interact with each other, but hopefully this gives you a step in the right direction when you are building Habs with stuff in them. So, if we go back for something a little bit more complicated now, if we go back to my wonderful interior that we built, let's say, okay, you know, the Hab is nice, but I want it to be colorful inside. I want this to look different. What we can do is we can play with material swaps, where you get a little preview window and a list of materials. This does require that your materials folder be what we call loose, which is to say open to the creation kit. And I'll show you what I mean by showing you my folder. So if I bring this over here, you can see in Starfield data, we have some folders open. This materials folder is the one that's key. As long as it is named materials and it actually contains all of the materials of the game, you will be able to do material swaps visually and to also create your own materials if you decide to go the completely custom route. The way you get this folder is by going up to the Starfield folder, and in Tools, you have Content Resources.zip. This is where you get materials, particles, and scripts, and what you do is you extract the materials folder in here into your Starfield data folder. It is recommended that you do not play the game with the materials folder loose like this, and you can sort that by renaming this folder. Commonly it's renamed to 123 materials, and that will prevent it from potentially causing issues in game for you. If you're going to come back and edit your plugin again, just make sure that you rename it back to regular materials before you open the creation kit, or else you will get an empty materials folder that does nothing for you. So, that warning aside, let's find some interesting walls to change. If you select materials here on the left, it will highlight them in the preview window. These preview windows can be a little finicky. There are settings available in preferences. Change them to your heart's desire. You will find something that works eventually. We're not going to touch the decals. We're just going to change the big materials, like these panel decals, the metal light, which is these edges here, the painted metal panel white, which is the brunt of the color of this particular wall, and the rubber diamond is our friend at the base here. And so let's say that we wanted it to be purple, because why not? We can go and we can find a material somewhere that is purple. Now, not every material can be used everywhere. Like this bin probably has some extra texture on it instead of just being like a metal color, and it will make the wall look weird if we do it. But we'll try it anyway. So now we have a purple wall. I will save this swap and then apply it. And then I can hit cancel here. And now we have a purple wall. You can see it's got some scratches, but otherwise it seems like this material is actually pretty okay. Sometimes the materials you pick have lines on them because they're intended only for certain kinds of objects, or other oddities that make it not suitable for where you want to put it. Now we could go in and individually click on every single one of these walls, and even on the ceiling, and do that whole process one by one. Or we can click on this, hit Edit Material Swaps, we can move the window out of the way a bit, and we can use Control-Click to select all of the other walls. And we hit Save again, because otherwise this complains, and we hit Apply. And then we close out of it. And now all of our walls are purple. Now, if we were to take this Hab and go in-game, what we would find is that some of the materials that we swap transfer directly to the doorway, and some of them do not. And this may not seem at first to have any sort of rhyme or reason. What it is the way the game determines what kind of door, and whether it's a door or the non-door side of the doorway. These are determined by what are called ship snap behaviors. And so we must look in that section if we want this to perfectly match. So let's say that we changed more and that we have a matching floor material that we want for the bottom here. And that we want it to be, let's find something weird and interesting. We want it to be metal. Let's make it foil triangles. Gotta make sure we get the right one for the rubber diamond. We want these to be foil triangles. We save it. We apply it. And we want this to be our floor. Now, when a doorway is formed here by the game, you may find that the foil triangles and the purple are not in a position that makes sense for how you want the colors to look. And so what you need to do here is you need to look at the ship snap behavior, which lives, let me see if I can remember where it lives, in miscellaneous. So here we hit ship behaviors. I'm going to remove my keyword, and this is what Bethesda uses to tell the game which doorways become which walls, what those walls look like, and some of the other behaviors for ladders and so on. Now, these walls are, as we can see in my selection view, are ship gen int. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at the matching one so that we understand what the door this turns into will look like. We know that this is a starboard wall, so we'll look at starboard behavior. This is where things might get a little complicated. This one, as you can see, determines the snaps for Stroud and Deimos, which are the ships that use these particular pieces. And they are separated by doorway, landing bay, docking hatch, and ones that deal with windows. And the cross passages. The way these work is you have a keyword where the first one, condition number 1 here, target 1, has keyword, and it says if the manufacturer, if there's a keyword on the Hab that says this, in this case the manufacturer is Deimos, and it's there, these values are usually binary for this. And the target Hab has a piece that says that it is a doorway port and is a ship Hab. And you're like, okay, so what does that all mean? If we go back to our sidewall here and we look at our keywords, which are going to live further down, you can see that we have a docking door keyword. And on the other side, we might have, for the external, where it needs to snap, that there is a doorway port and a ship Hab. And then, once all those conditions are met, the game goes, okay, I need to make a doorway. What doorway do I make? It's a replacement operation, and our payload points to a pack-in. Wall starboard mid XSM with door 01. We can say, okay, So we want to look at that so we can understand why our materials are not correctly connecting. And so these are pack-ins, which means we can load them in the render window. And we know that this is a starboard door, and it's going to be the wall. So let's go look at it. Okay, so this is the doorway. And we want to make sure that it will be the same as our materials that we chose. And so we need to create a copy of this because we do not want to edit vanilla objects. And we can name it with our same naming scheme so that we can find it and so that it is distinct from, say, other modders who might be editing similar objects. We rename it. We open it in the render window. And now we can do our swaps on this. We can say that we want this rubber base to be the metal triangles, and we also want those little panels in the middle there to be the metal triangles. And we want our purple bin for our walls and our painted metal pieces. We save the swaps, we apply them, and now we have a matching swapped object. And you can of course swap on the door as well to have it make a matching or contrasting color, whatever you want. Then we need to make a snap behavior that matches. So we go back to our ship behaviors, and we were looking at the gen starboard. We duplicate this, and we can get rid of, say, everybody that doesn't match. You can see we need a keyword though, so we need to add a keyword that is for our objects. So if we go back to our thing, here we can say, okay, yeah, we've got this. Let's add a keyword, or let's make a new keyword. And the type here needs to be a manufacturer. Where are you? And we add it also to our outside piece. You can see this is where we have the Hab keyword and the manufacturer Deimos keyword. We remove the Deimos keyword and we add ours. This way, only our snap behaviors will apply to these doors. So we can now go back to our snap behaviors. Which we need to rename. And here we can say change this so that it says our new one instead. And our payload will be the one we just finished editing. And then you need to match this for all of the behaviors that we saw in the default forms. In this case, you need, so Deimos and Stroud each have one. You don't need to have this many of them, obviously. So we just duplicate every Deimos entry here into our own form and change the keyword so that it matches our keyword, and change the payloads so that they match our design. This way, when you have a cross passage, a landing bay, a docking hatch, or a window, all of your materials are exactly the way you want them to be, and you maintain the identity of your design. So let's take a look and see what that looks like in-game when we have a custom snap behavior involved. For this, I'm going to make sure that I have my Ashlander Habs loaded, as those are the only ones I've done this with so far. Must be up here. There we go. Okay, so for this demo, I'll show you my Ashlander Habs. We'll just do a small one once this loads of what the Hab looks like with, say, only a hatch or with only one doorway. And then when I connect another Hab to the side or above it, you'll be able to see what the reference disabling does. Okay, so let's take a look at the one Hab by itself, or with only the one doorway. What I've done is I've stacked an empty Hab with my captain's quarters. So this is an Ashlander Living empty Hab. You can see I have a large number of custom materials placed, and so it was very important that the doorway maintain this custom material on the floor and on the walls, which it wasn't doing until I generated a custom snap behavior. This is maintained as I walk through into the next tab. You can see there was stuff on these front and back walls, and they are now gone because of the placement of the doors. If I were to swap this Hab for the empty one behind it, we might find that this table disappears, and that maybe the rugs disappear because there's a hatch from the bottom. So that's basically it. I hope that this tutorial / walkthrough was helpful to you. If you think I missed something, or if there's a better way to do something that I've done, please let me know. I'm always happy to learn how to do these things better. But the goal here was to show people a little bit about how Habs are made in Starfield modding, and I hope this has maybe inspired you or enabled you to make a Hab mod of your own.